before the title of this. It felt good.
Yeah.
I'm generally not I'm like total personal preference. I'm usually not a person who like puts the Y in front of my name on stuff, but when it's the pods account, when it's
Yeah, the pod for sure.
I'm game.
Yeah. But what's more amazing is getting a Y before everybody else gets
I
an
know.
X.
Nobody else with an X. It's too good.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Fun stuff. All right, I'll bring us in here. I'll probably wait till like it gets to a minute or so. Makes it easier for the edit.
Sounds good.
Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined with Santiago Beltran. It's not a Fallout show. It's not a regular Flyover Footy. It's a special edition of the pod. Why? Well, it's in the title. We have a Y in front of our name. We're celebrating the fact that St. Louis City has clinched the regular season MLS Western Conference first place title, championship, however you want to put it. It's an exciting time for City, the first expansion team in the non-shootout era to do this. We've qualified for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and we still have a match this weekend to preview. So we had planned on doing this pod regardless of what happened this weekend, but thanks to the Sunday night Real Salt Lake 1-0 win over LAFC, it is now a mathematical certainty that St. Louis City will be first place in the Western Conference in their first season in MLS. How about that, Santi?
That's amazing. I don't think anybody outside of the team imagine being in this position with 2 weeks to go before the end of the regular season. What I want to ask you, is it really a championship? I like. Is it? Do you consider it like a conference championship, or what do you think of it?
Man, that's the discussion today. We're recording this Monday afternoon, and that is the discussion, right? Some people, some MLS fans of other clubs are getting really touchy if you call us regular season Western Conference champions, as if that phrase didn't exist in general before this. Like there's apparently the way that some Sounders and RSL fans are talking specifically on some of these comments on X and Twitter and Facebook is that regular season, you can't be a champion of anything in a regular season, despite the fact that there's a Western Conference table, despite the fact that there's a first, second, third in the Western Conference. You can't be a champion because there's no trophy associated to it.
Right.
Well, obviously, we're not going to hang a banner like the Nashville Predators did in the NHL, but I think people are getting a little too touchy here. There's a little sensitivity and insecurity going on by some of these other fan bases, seeing what St. Louis City has been able to do. And I won't lie, Santi, part of it makes me giggle a little bit. I'm here for it. I'm here for the slander of City saying you can't call yourselves champions. You can't call yourselves title winners of anything. You didn't win anything because you don't have a cup or a trophy to show for it. But there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of consternation from these fan bases.
Yeah, but it's still a great achievement. But yeah, I a few friends who are not used to MLS and more soccer in Latin America, they were like, "How is this a championship?" It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, it's not a championship, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
still like you get first place, you get home advantage. Yeah, it's not a trophy, but it's still something.
Well, in that regard, I mean, so I thought of this too. What if real quick, MLS decides next year to say, yeah, we want to increase the prestige of the regular season for the other conference. We're going to give you a trophy. We're going to say, okay, the winner of the overall table in the entire league gets the Supporter Shield, as it should be and as it
Mm,
always has been. But the other conference winner, you're still a first place team. We're suddenly going to give you
mm.
a small trophy to say, here you go, good job. Would it then be a championship? Is it the fact that there is hardware, silverware associated to it, or is it the concept of, in history, soccer typically has one table and you have one regular season champion, you have one in America, you have one playoff champion, and so whatever we're doing is kind of pigeonholing the best of both worlds. But I guess I'm also wondering at that point, people always say the regular season doesn't matter. And they
Yeah.
always say it's just a fight to get into the playoffs. Well, that's also because of the prestige you put on the playoffs, where you're saying the Eastern Conference, Western Conference champions in the playoffs are crowned overall conference champions. They get their trophies. But the seasons aren't done. All it is basically second, third place prizes or second prize for getting to the cup. You still have an MLS Cup. So I don't know. Part of me is just, and part of me just wants something also to show for it. But I'm happy we're here. And I think it's an interesting conversation of, is it just the sheer fact that a cup or a trophy hasn't been created for this position yet, despite the fact that it is first in the standings? It wins the regular season for your conference. And it really goes to show the full scope of what you've been able to accomplish in 32 games so far. Clinching first place in your conference 32 games in is an accomplishment. It satisfies the issue that people have of it's a long and arduous season, and you need to be recognized for that long process more so than just qualification for a playoffs. There's a lot of people who are talking out of both sides of their mouth from my perspective in this conversation.
Yeah, I think what's confusing, especially for some of the people that have asked me that are not familiar with MLS and playoffs, they're like, this is their first year following the league. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but what about the playoffs? There is a
Mm-hmm.
Western Conference champion, so how are you champion now? Like, it's just yeah, a little bit of confusion, but to me, it's still a great accomplishment. Regular season first place and getting basically ready for the playoffs with that home field advantage. That's a great accomplishment.
It is. And it shouldn't be diminished on any level because 32 games, the only team to qualify for the playoffs in the conference, the only team to clinch the first place in the entire conference when nobody else has qualified for the playoffs. The congestion that has been discussed in the Western Conference with the conference, and this is the other thing, since St. Louis is on top, people are very quick to say, oh, this is a weak conference this year, as if the fact that an expansion side St. Louis City team being first in the Western Conference standings immediately means everybody is weaker. I think it's everybody else is beating up on each other a lot more than in the East, where you have a clear hierarchy of it's obvious that you're looking at your FC Cincinnati, your New England Revolution, Orlando, Philadelphia, Nashville, those teams, and then you have your bottom dwellers too.
Yeah,
In the West, it's literally anybody could win except for City, who has already won it. 2 through 10, I think it's just 8 points separate or 6 points, some crazy low number separates 2 through
eight,
10.
eight.
8. So you could look at literally anything could happen at this point. There is any single
Yeah,
mathematical scenario where LAFC can drop out of the playoffs, where Seattle can drop out of the playoffs. And their fans are having to reconcile with that reality while we're over here putting Y's in front of our names.
yeah. So obviously, team number 10 is a little bit separated from number 9. So if you just look at 2 to 9, it's only 5 points.
And which
And
team is number 10?
Kansas.
There you go. Had to get that out there.
Which but yeah, it's just as you said, everybody is beating each other. Even when you think about cities season, like yeah, some of these teams city beat on both games, but if you think about it, city couldn't get 3 points against LAFC or against LA Galaxy, split the series with Portland Timbers, with Minnesota, got the 6 points from Austin, split the series with Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that is like any week anybody can win, and that's why nobody has clinched yet. But the
Yep.
one thing I'm thinking about, I go back to when we look at this before the second half of the season started, and I think we settled around 43, 44 points for number 9, and
Yeah.
City got to 44 points after beating Austin. If City had not won any games after that, not gotten any points, it will still be in fifth place.
How about that? I think we did pretty well in our predictions, right?
I think it's gonna be, since everybody's like beating each other and at some draws like taking points from each other. Number 9, it will probably be closer to 43, 42. I think it'll be on the low end.
That's fair. And those are what we did in our predictions was looking at historical averages. Any season can be a little up, a little down, but we were pretty accurate, I think, too, on where City would have been in any given scenario, and especially clinching the playoffs and the conference title. And it happened so quickly, right? Because this weekend it was all of you clinch home field as a top four, and then the cards fall the next day, and you suddenly have the conference title, regular season conference win, whatever you're going to call it.
Yeah.
Either way, we're going to have more on the celebration, more on the discussion about the league-wide conversation on our big flyover episode that we're going to stream Thursday night. And that'll be out on Pods Friday, so stay tuned for that. But the other big reason that we're here is we do have a match this week. And it's kind of a funny way to do it because it's just a few days rest. We have a Wednesday match against Vancouver, and then an international break is occurring. But most MLS teams are actually in action next weekend, where they finish up their the second to last games. So St. Louis has the luxury at this point of playing Vancouver on October 4th, and then we have a week and a half off before we welcome the Seattle Sounders for Decision Day. So Santi, are you ready to preview the Vancouver Whitecaps?
Let's do it.
All right, so we know St. Louis has clinched the regular season Western Conference Championship. First place in the West, 56 points through 32 games. We have a 17-10-5 record now with 62 goals scored, a plus 22 goal differential. We got tied for first with Columbus in goals scored, and we are best in the league in goal differential. Our away record is 6-7-3, 6 wins, 7 losses, 3 draws. That's the third best away record in the Western Conference and the fifth best in the league. So perspective is important as far as the away record goes. Form is pretty good for St. Louis City. 4-1 win over SKC this past weekend. We beat Minnesota United 2-1 the weekend prior, and we drew LAFC midweek before, 2-0-1 in the last 3. Vancouver comes into this 6th place in the West. They are a part of that congested 2 through 9, 2 through 10 that is all fighting for their playoff lives. 6th place in the West on 43 points. They have 31 games played, an 11-10-10 record with 51 goals scored, 47 goals against, and that's a plus 4 goal differential. At home at BC Place up in Vancouver, they are 7-3-5. Vancouver's formed the last few games. They drew DC United this past weekend 2-2. They drew the Colorado Rapids 2-2 midweek prior, and they lost 2-1 to RSL the weekend before. Vancouver is one of these teams where if you look at their schedule, it's very much different than I think any other MLS side. There are some times throughout the year where you have a couple matches in a row. You might not go home. St. Louis had one earlier this year where we went to Toronto and then flew directly to LA. But Vancouver has had a stretch prior to this past weekend of 7 straight away games from August 26th until this past weekend when they returned home to play DC United. Before their home game this past Saturday, they've only had one home game immediately following Leagues Cup. That's dating back to July 15th even. So this team has not played very many matches at home. They've had a lot of road games lately. Overall in this season, they've had 5 clean sheets, and they've had 4 times they've been shut out. So their record really does speak for how their overall season has been. It's been up and down. It's been difficult to find consistency. And the departure of Julian Gressel is a big reason for that. As we dig into the key players here in just a moment, Julian Gressel is going to be one that is not listed. He was traded to Columbus during the transfer window, and he leaves behind 3 goals, 5 assists, and 30 key passes that he had contributed to Vancouver before being traded away. Santi, what's your take on this Vancouver Whitecaps team, their form recently, their difficult travel schedule?
Yeah, obviously coming into this game not in great form, trying to get a couple of points that will put them in the playoffs, clinch it, even if they don't clinch mathematically. If they win against City, I think they will be very close. But yeah, just the inconsistency of their schedule, I think, is taking a toll, and playing so many games away. Although they had relative success in this last stretch before they went back home and played DC United.
Mm-hmm.
Before losing to Houston and then RSL, they had a tie at New York City FC. Well, I guess this one was against Toronto, so it was in Canada, but it still counts. But yeah, the last even if you go 4 games, the last 4 games they are winless. They lost to Houston Dynamo 4-1. So yeah, trying to find 3 points again and secure their place in playoffs. But yeah, even though Gressel left about 9, 10 games ago, he's
Mhm.
still up there in the
Exactly.
stats for goals and for assists. So yeah, it's been hard to replace him. But something I got from the press conference from our friend Har, she was talking about what Ryan Gold and Brian White had been doing, and yeah, basically they keep scoring and assisting. So
Oh, yeah.
they have tried to fill in for that absence of Julian Gressel.
And you mentioned the form in the wins and losses over the past few games, especially with their 7-game away stretch. The only 2 teams that they've beaten, before they since Portland, basically, so from Chicago on, towards just before September, are teams outside the playoff picture. So they beat Portland, and that was probably their, I don't know, I would say hallmark win, but Portland's a 7th place team right now. Their wins since then are against Chicago Fire and Toronto FC, both of who are outside looking in on the Eastern Conference playoff picture. Toronto's a historically bad team this year, and they're beating these by 1 goal. So they're tying the teams that are in contention. They're losing to quality teams like Houston and Salt Lake. I don't know. It seems like the run of form is right where City wants to catch them. Add on to that fact that Vancouver is one of those teams that plays next weekend. They're in the middle of a 3 games in 8 days stretch. They had DC United last weekend. They have us Wednesday. Then they have to travel again just across the border to Seattle to play the Sounders. That's no easy task. They finished the season against LAFC. So this team is really going to struggle to find wins against quality opponents who are themselves fighting for playoff positioning. You're looking at an LAFC team that is now 4th in the conference. They're potentially about to lose their home field in the first round advantage. Seattle is needing to hold on to that next weekend. And so you're looking at a lot of teams with a lot on the line. And that's one of the big stories that we're really going to get into is St. Louis, what are they fighting for compared to what Vancouver's fighting for? But before we get into the big stories, Santi, I want to pick up on Gald and Brian White. So the key players that we need to watch for Vancouver. There aren't that many when it comes to contributions to the goal, contributions to creating opportunities, but it really goes to Ryan Gald, Andre Kubas, Brian White, and we mentioned the impact that Julian Gressel had, but he's gone, and that is going to be felt on their wing because when we talk about the styles of play, think of what Julian Gressel could have brought to that team. But for those who were remaining, goal scoring leaders are Brian White with 14, Ryan Gald with 11. The next highest goal scorer on their team is Simon Betcher, the SLU alum with 4 goals. These 2 players, and Har mentioned it on the press conference on Monday, that they call them Batman and Robin up in Vancouver because they're the ones doing all the work. They're cleaning everything up, Gald and White. Andres Cubas, their central defensive midfielder, leads the team in tackles and interceptions, and he's a designated player. Yeah, so look for number 20, the Argentinian midfielder, to impact some of our buildups and our runs of play. When you look at who's going to hurt us on the offensive side, it's Ryan Gald and it's Brian White.
Yeah, just they keep scoring and assisting each other and have most of the goals contributions for Vancouver. But yeah, when I was looking at the leading scorers, I was like, oh, Simon Betcher is up there, but I didn't go back and look, but those goals, at
He,
least 2 or 3, I remember
yes,
were from earlier in the season.
he had a flurry of goals at the beginning of the season. But to that point, it would not surprise me to see a guy like Simon Betcher at feature at some point. That's the thing with where Vancouver is right now is one of the big stories is their hunger to remain a playoff team. And they're in a very difficult situation to do that. We've talked so many times about City's rotation when it comes to midweek matches, when it comes to 3 matches in 8 days. But because of when we've been able to win games, and you mentioned it earlier, and City put out a nice graphic of all of their wins leading up to setting the expansion team record in the non-shootout era, and all of those teams have been playoff teams at one point or another, or we've beaten the teams we need to at the bottom of the table. I think there's only a couple of matches I can think of, Chicago being the one that jumps out at me,
Yeah.
that we lost to that has been a consistent non-playoff contender. Barring that, like we've beaten the teams we need to, and that's why we're in the position we're in. But Vancouver, they're looking at a scenario where they could drop out of the playoff picture with a loss to us immediately, and then they're playing Seattle and LAFC next. they can't afford to do significant rotation because they need their two best players. They need all three of the players we just mentioned on the field as much as possible. Gald was even an injury concern going into this past weekend, but he was able to go and go effectively with a PK goal. They're dealing with a lot of desperation, I think, and facing a team like Vancouver from City's perspective, offers opportunity. And so we know Vancouver's hungry to remain this playoff team. They have to deal with the fixture congestion. They have to deal with the fact that they do funnel their entire offense through two players. But what do you think City's going to look like this week, knowing all of the things that are going into on the field and off their trip to Vancouver?
Well, it's a midweek game, but the advantage is that there isn't a game next weekend. So I think there will be some rotation. Some players that haven't started or played a lot of minutes recently will probably play. But at the same time, I think City has in their mind, okay, I clinch first place, but I still want to get that record of most points by an expansion team, and I have two opportunities to do it. I have one on Wednesday, and then I have a long break. So why not try to go at it on Wednesday with a competitive lineup?
So that's the thing, Santi, is midweek matchup on a turf field. Those are a couple of the big things that we knew coming into this. And so we asked Bradley Carnell. We had the opportunity to talk to him at the press conference on Monday. And regarding the turf, his comments were very high level. And it was simply from an injury perspective that it's likely Joachim Nilsson won't go. Would not be surprised to not see him on the game day roster at all. But beyond that, his only comments were everybody should be available. Even Josh Yarrow, who was at practice, practicing with the team that we saw. But his comments to him after Josh Yarrow picked up a back issue after the
Hmm.
Minnesota game, it seemed like he's good to go. He's back. But that doesn't really help us out when it comes to the game plan or the rotation and given the week and a half break that's upcoming. I think everybody's expecting a little bit of rotation at the very least. Whether that means letting your foot up off the gas entirely and going with almost a rotated 11 in general, or if it means just plugging and playing a few different players and going all out for the 58-point record that Bradley Carnell has mentioned multiple times. If that's one other thing to keep in mind, it's not that, okay, we've qualified for home field advantage throughout the Western Conference. We are in the driver's seat. We are ready to go. We just need to go into the playoffs healthy and in form, and so we can turn over our roster. Bradley Cornell's mentioned multiple times that he wants to, and he said this directly in the press conference, he wants a record that is, I mean, I think of Hamilton. He wants a record that's going to outlive him. He wants
Right.
something that's going to stand for more than just one season. He doesn't want to tie the LAFC 57 points. He wants to just get as much as possible so that when people think of the greatest first season of all time in MLS, they immediately think of St. Louis, and there's no other contender. That's the other thing we have to juggle here, in addition to the realities of the match happening just a few days after a pivotal Sporting Kansas match, and the fact that we do have certainty in the playoffs ahead. So we'll talk about our lineup predictions here in a few minutes, but I'm wondering, I'm just wondering how much Bradley Carnell is going to try to pull a San Jose or pull a Minnesota where he knows, he has faith that no matter who he rotates in, they can perform and maybe even pick up a job again, like Akil Watts in the former and Jake Nerwinski in the latter. But the one thing I will say, I've heard a couple questions, and I do want to address the question of, do you think Carnell will play mostly City 2 players? And I would say no. And the reason for that are MLS roster rules. Once you pass a certain point in the year, the rosters are locked. You are only allowed one affiliate call up for one game. Now,
For
whether you
one game.
say for one game, and whether you say that's Johnny Klein and we already did it, and so he counts for our entire season as our one, I don't know specifically. We could have one player, but I don't think that's really what's in Bradley Carnell's mind.
No.
We have a deep enough City roster that I think you can expect some of the guys like maybe a Nuke Thorson, Nico Joachini, who didn't start last game, John Bell, maybe Josh Yarrow, those kinds of players to see more minutes.
Yeah, especially City too just played their playoff game yesterday. So
Yeah.
the guys that you could think, okay, they may get added as that one player. They played 90 minutes for a good amount of the game yesterday. So I would say no.
Yeah, and I think most of those questions were as far as showcasing the younger guys, not necessarily just giving everybody rest, but like as an opportunity to give them minutes or prove something. But it's a combination of, yeah, they just played, but also I don't think MLS roster rules don't allow for the upward
Hmm.
movement of players in that manner. Okay, so the last big story that we have that I want to touch on is Jake Nerwinski in general. He was the player made available at the press conference on Monday. This is his first time back in Vancouver. His quote, when asked by his friend Har from Vancouver, is, "I think it's going to be a special moment. I spent 6 seasons. They were my first professional club, the only one I've known up until now, joining City. I owe that club a lot, and happy to come back." And we've heard Jake talk about his friendship with Ryan Gauld, the texting that they did before the last match.
Hmm.
This is special for Jake, and so I would like to see him start of anybody that we have. I think there's some players who are going to push for starting because they're just those kinds of players. They never want to be taken off the field, and we know who those players are. But Jake Nerwinski in particular, despite the fact that, yeah, obviously he wants to play all the time, like everybody, it's personal for him, and so he's one of those players like an AZ Jackson who didn't start against Minnesota, and like some of the other players who have played former teams, Indy with Miami, Tim Parker with Houston, those kinds of things that provide an opportunity for kind of a storybook type narrative.
Yeah, yeah. Nerwinski, I definitely have him in my lineup. And yeah, I think it'll be great for him to go back after 6 seasons, being able to play there. I'm sure he will provide a lot of insight to the coaching staff about Vancouver and about White and Gold. So yeah, let him play.
And I did love the question that Har asked at the press conference of noting that Ryan Gauld and Brian White are, or at least she's starting to refer to them as Batman and Robin, and they're trying to get that going in Vancouver because of their impact. Hart asked Jake what his superhero name would be, after completely sidestepping the question when we asked him to follow up on it. He goes, "Maybe I'll be the supervillain in this one," which I can completely appreciate, and that's just Jake's personality. It was really fun to hear him kind of get into that. And you could tell he's enjoying this, right? It's his homecoming, so to speak, with where he developed as a professional, and it's a nice opportunity that St. Louis gets to go up there, and the focus gets to be on that for a little bit. Maybe with a little less pressure than it otherwise would have been, knowing that we've clinched what we have so far. So the hunger's there, the drive's there, but you have to believe that this is going to be an exciting week for Jake.
Yeah, yeah, and he started to play in more games and has been doing great. So he picked it up at the right time just before playing Vancouver. So yeah, hopefully he will start.
All right, let's get into some styles of play, formations, how they might line up. Earlier in the season, Vancouver leveraged wingbacks, and that was probably because of Julian Gressel and what his impact to the offense was. They had three center backs. They used wingbacks. It was kind of the same formation that Jake ran when he was there, where they would leverage him in one of the corner center back roles. But lately, they've actually ran kind of a 4-4-2, leveraging Gauld and White up top, and it's been a little fluid. But seeing four defenders and just using Gauld and White as their two primary attackers, whether it's one in front of the other, both on the side, we're going to see those two in the attack, in the attacking third, an awful lot, creating for each other and just being all over the ball. But looking at what Vancouver's strengths are, they're good at stealing the ball from the opposition. They don't have the highest pressing rates, but they're very good at intercepting. They're very good at putting pressure on some of the ball carriers. They're good at counterattacks. They're good on attacking set pieces, and they finish their scoring chances. They have a high percentage comparatively in the league of shots on target versus goals. So that's something to watch out for, is their effectiveness. What they're not good at are defending through ball attacks, defending against highly skilled individual players, protecting the lead. That's why they have all these draws, 10 draws so far in the season. They're very weak at defending set pieces. I've got a stat here in a minute for that. Their style of play is they like to attack through the middle. They like to go straight up through their attackers. They will attempt crosses very often. So you look at what they've done recently versus what they've done earlier in the season, and you kind of see a little bit of all over the place. You see them working through the wings, crossing the ball in, working through their midfield as of late, taking a lot of shots. I think that's one thing that we can look forward to with Vancouver is consistently trying to put the ball on net. And if we're going to let them possess the ball like I know City wants to, then we can expect a lot of low percentage shots. And that's what City does best is forcing their opponents into low percentage shots. Bradley Carnell's even said that since they let go of some of their players like Julian Gressel, they really changed their style of play. They've been very fluid, flexible. He says they can change formations. They're very adaptive, very transitional. They're good in the counter press. They've got players like Rangold who are the best in the league. And Carnell says, quote, it's almost like playing against your brother. They have similar principles.
Yeah.
You can see it in many moments that they'll work with and without the ball.
Yeah, it will be. And if we go back and think about when they came to City Park, Vancouver, even though the final score was 3-1, Vancouver earlier in the game had a couple of chances to score, and then
Mm-hmm.
when City took a 2-0 lead, they kept pushing and scored a goal, and it wasn't until stoppage time that City was able to score a goal to put away the game.
And you wonder how the dying minutes of this kind of a game would go, depending on if the game's tied. Is Vancouver going to be happy with the draw in this game? A home draw, it seems like it would be a massive disappointment knowing where you are on the table and who your remaining matches are against. I look for this match to kind of go if City can stay even with Vancouver, it forces a lot of pressure on the Whitecaps to do something and try to create something, maybe get outside of themselves a little more and try to more of their team in high against St. Louis, which could leave them vulnerable for counterattacks. That's something I'm very excited to see from St. Louis is how long can they keep a draw throughout this game. I would not be upset at all if it went into half 0-0, 1-1, if it progressed into the 75th minute and we were still at a draw, whatever the goals are. And then I think the tactical subs that Carnell has been able to show that he can make these past couple of games, the growth that he's shown as a manager in that area, coupled with the desperation that Vancouver has to get 3 points at home. It's a recipe for success that I think St. Louis can build on.
Yeah, so good chance to get 3 points, probably late as you were saying, and break that record. And then you go on a break, you give the team some days off, and then get ready for decision day, and then going into the playoffs a week later.
That's right. Got a couple of stats before we get into our lineups and our score predictions. Looking at what we can expect from Vancouver Whitecaps on the press, we know that St. Louis is among the absolute lowest in the league in PPDA, passes per defensive action, showing how many passes a team allows the opponent before making a defensive action like a tackle interception. The lower means the more press you have. So St. Louis is third lowest in the league, right wedged between Atlanta and LAFC with just a 0.1 difference. I mean, we're talking minuscule with these top teams here. But Vancouver's 14th, right next to the Houston Dynamo. They don't press as often, they don't press as high, but they won't let you work the ball in to their attacking third without trying to make a move. It's that kind of an offense. They'll play the ball in the mid quite a bit. St. Louis is also the most direct team in the league, second fewest passes per sequence. I did enjoy against Sporting Kansas where we had one sequence at least where it was 10 plus passes. So that ability for St. Louis to build up and to create with the ball on the ground to one of Vancouver's deficiencies, which is allowing through balls. That's been a somewhat of a surprise for St. Louis City lately, and that could be something to watch for. But Vancouver's 12th most in the league in direct play, 10th most in passes per sequence. So they are going to possess the ball a little bit more. They average about 49% possession. St. Louis averages 44. So if we can edge them above 50%, I think that leads us to where we want to go. And it makes Vancouver play a little less direct, move the ball around a little bit more than even they're comfortable with. Where I think there's an interesting advantage for St. Louis also is on set pieces. St. Louis leads the league in set piece goals with 15. Vancouver has allowed the most set piece goals this year with 14. There's a very interesting opportunity here for Edu Leuven to be the star of the show, Indiana Vassilev to be the star of the show, and to really take advantage of earning fouls in some of those dangerous areas that we know St. Louis is so good at.
Yeah, yeah. St. Louis hasn't scored in a set piece in a while, so it's due for another one of those. And yeah, with Vancouver being one of their weaknesses, I think there is a good possibility for City to focus on that and maybe score a goal or two. And the other one that it's important to me, you were also talking about Vancouver being weak with with um, through balls,
Hmm.
and City being so direct. I think that's going to be another key for this game.
Yep. Santi, you ready to go into the lineups?
Let's do it.
All right, I'll start. And this is a close your eyes and throw a dart situation here, because the only thing Bradley Carnell has to go off of for us is everybody's available, minus probably Nielsen. So with everyone available, with it being an away match, being 2 points off of the number he keeps calling out, knowing we have Seattle at home, and that can be targeted for a win as much as you can target either one of these. This might be a game where we're happy to take away a point. Who do you roll out in that scenario? Um, I went back and forth on Berkey and Lunt. I wouldn't be surprised with Lunt, to be honest. Nobody should be surprised if we see Ben Lunt in net. It would be his last opportunity to intentionally see MLS minutes this year, and I think that's viable. So I'll go with it. I'll say that Ben Lunt gets this start. My back line is going to be Kyle Hebert, Josh Yarrow, John Bell, and Jake Nerwinski. Massively rotated, minus Jake. Still want to see him in for all the reasons we mentioned. Kyle Hebert, I like that Chris Gebhardt in the chat mentioned as a Canadian, that would be an interesting opportunity. Also, kind of maybe an interesting opportunity to showcase Kyle Hebert, whether it's at left back or center back. Canadian teams in MLS are rewarded for signing domestic players. They are valuable on their roster, and when Hebert was in form earlier this year, there was conversations about how long he might be on City. Could he be an opportunity for a trade piece with all of our depth on the back line? That's a topic for another conversation. Let me stay focused. Hebert, Yarrow, Bell, Nerwinski. I've got Akil Watts at the 6. I've got Edu Leuven in the midfield because it's Edu Leuven. Carnell even said that he was talking about playing this week right after the previous
Yeah,
game. I can't see him out of the lineup. I've got AZ Jackson, Jared Stroud, Klaus, and Nico up top. I wavered so much about AZ and Stroud because I could easily see Nuke V. Thorson in there. I don't quite see Rasmus Alm there yet, but I could easily see Indiana Vasilev.
yeah, yeah. So here's mine. I also debated between Berkey and Lund. Even before we went live, we were talking about. I was mentioning even Michael Crick. If you want to give him a chance to get a start, this could be it. But I'm sticking with Berkey.
Hmm.
And then backline, basically same as you, Nerwinski, Bell, and Jarrow, and then Kyle Heaver. Midfield, I have Jabulo Blom, although I don't think he will play the whole game. We'll
Yep.
probably see Akil Watts at some point. And then I have Basilev, Celio, and AC Jackson. And up top, I have Klaus and Nico Joaquini.
I really like that midfield. I would love to see Salio. I would love to see Indy. I would love to see Salio and Nuke V. Thorson. I could probably call up about 5 different variations of a roster and a lineup that I would be pretty satisfied with.
Yeah,
Both from, I think they would be competitive and it would be fun to see these players run out. I like Salio. I like Nuke V. Thorson a lot. And I think getting them more time out, more of a run of play, whether it's Nico as the sole striker, and then you have Nuke V. Thorson on the left, Salio on the right, whoever you want in the middle, like Indy or AZ. Like there's so many opportunities, so many options. Um, we got to make sure we have these written down, Santi, because with so many possibilities discussed, we got to hold ourselves to if we happen to get it right or if we
yeah.
go 0 for 11 for the first time all
Oh, for
season.
11. Yeah, we'll
Well,
see.
we have different keepers, so one of us is going to be wrong there.
Did you change it?
I
Oh,
changed it.
you
Yep.
changed it to Lund. Okay.
Yep. Beginning of the show, I definitely had Berkey, but as we're talking, I talked myself into it, and that was my official one.
All
Score
right.
prediction, Santi.
Mine is 1-1, although I keep thinking about it, but yeah, I'm going to stick with 1-1. When you mentioned that the game is going to get to like the 70th minute mark, tied, and maybe Vancouver desperate to score. City can take advantage of that, and just knowing that the style of play City plays doesn't isn't really draw friendly, tie friendly. It could be a possibility, but I'm gonna stick with the 1-1.
We've had a few draws lately, so that's not a bad call out. I had 2-1 because I think that whether it goes 0-0 at half or 1-1 at half, I think it's going to end up tied later in the game, and then St. Louis is going to pull one out, let's say 80th minute or later, because I do think Vancouver is going to get a little over anxious and they're going to try a little too much. St. Louis is going to be a little more clinical and methodical and measured in this match. Now, Santi, before we go, there was a question in the chat from Chris Gavhart that I do think is a fun way to end the topic. What's more sore, your throat after calling a game or your forearms after waving the Santos flag for as long as you did at the City 2 match?
Well, since the game was on Saturday and I already had almost 2 days to recover, I'm gonna go with my forearms after waving the flag. That was fun yesterday. I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Hopefully, we get to see you do that a whole lot more next year because that was a blast seeing you get out for City 2 and be one of those that led the charge. And it was fun to see at the City Sprint, too. You did the same thing, running with the flag. That's always great to see.
Yeah, yeah. We when that was announced, a few people from Santos were talking about it. I was like, yeah, I'm in.
All right, Santi, anything else for you today?
No, no. Let's get 1 or 3 points, and if it is 3 points, another record broken. It looks like this is happening like every game now.
It's crazy.
So that
It
would
is
be really
absolutely
exciting.
crazy. I
Yeah. So
cannot believe just how consistently this is happening, right?
yeah.
Like every single game, it's almost like a roller coaster race to the finish where you don't have time to catch your breath about one fun thing happening for the expansion team. All we know is what's happening right now. And it's the dream continues. We're going to have plenty more on it on Thursday as we recap the Whitecaps and just talk a whole lot more about the MLS landscape, where we are, and some different conversations that are going on that are all centered around St. Louis City SC being first place in the Western Conference in 2023.
No, that sounds great.
Santi, thanks for joining me. Everybody, thanks for joining us on Flyover Footy. Enjoy the Vancouver Whitecaps match. Enjoy celebrating being first place in the MLS Western Conference in 2023. We will talk to you later.